My name is Heather Lawson, and I was 42 years old when I discovered my husband's family had been using my garage like a free storage unit for almost 3 years. The worst part wasn't the boxes. It was the assumption. The assumption that, of course, I wouldn't mind. Of course, I'd make room. Of course, I'd deal with it. Because that's what Heather always did. At least that's what everyone seemed to believe. I lived outside Louisville, Kentucky, with my husband, Ryan, and our 17-year-old son, Mason. Life wasn't glamorous. It was normal. Work, school, groceries, weekends, the kind of life most people never think about because nothing dramatic ever happens. At least that's what I thought. Our garage was supposed to be my space. Not entirely, but mostly. Ryan parked in the driveway. I parked inside. I kept holiday decorations there, tools, camping equipment, old photo albums, the usual things people store when life gets crowded. Then one Saturday morning in May, I opened the garage and noticed something strange. A stack of boxes. 6 large cardboard boxes. Neatly labeled. Not mine. I stood there staring at them, trying to remember if Ryan had bought something. Maybe business supplies. Maybe equipment. Maybe furniture. I walked over and looked closer. One label immediately caught my eye. Diane, kitchen. Another said, guest bedroom. A third said, Christmas decor. I frowned, because Diane was Ryan's older sister, and Diane definitely did not live in my house. I walked back inside. Ryan was drinking coffee in the kitchen. I pointed toward the garage. Why are Diane's boxes in our garage? His reaction lasted less than a second, but I saw it. That tiny pause. That moment when somebody realizes a conversation is about to get uncomfortable. Oh, just one word. Oh, not surprise. Recognition. The same recognition people have when they forgot to tell you something important. I folded my arms. What are Diane's boxes doing in my garage? Ryan took a sip of coffee, then answered far too casually. She's storing some stuff. Some stuff. I almost laughed, because 6 giant boxes weren't some stuff, and more importantly, nobody had asked me. When exactly did this happen? Ryan looked toward the garage. Maybe last year. I blinked. What? He immediately corrected himself. Maybe 2 years ago. My stomach dropped. 2 years. 2 years? I walked back into the garage, this time actually looking around, really looking. And suddenly, I noticed things I had ignored for months. Plastic bins, furniture covered with blankets, storage shelves I didn't recognize, a folded table, 3 lamps, suitcases, boxes, more boxes, everywhere. My heart started beating faster because I suddenly realized something. Those 6 boxes hadn't appeared. They were simply the first ones I'd actually paid attention to. I walked from one side of the garage to the other, reading labels. Diane, 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 Diane. Almost everything belonged to Diane. I stood there for several seconds, completely stunned. Then I grabbed my phone, opened the calculator, and estimated how much of the garage wasn't ours anymore. Nearly half. Half of my garage had somehow become Diane's storage unit, and nobody had ever bothered to tell me. That evening, I decided to clean one corner, just one corner. I moved a plastic bin, then another, then found something that made my stomach tighten immediately, a handwritten inventory sheet. Typed at the top were 4 words, Lawson Family Storage Plan. I stared at the paper, then slowly started reading. And halfway down the page, I found my own address listed as Storage Location A. That's when I realized this wasn't just Diane's idea. This had been planned. And suddenly, I had a feeling my garage wasn't the only thing being used without permission. I sat at the kitchen table holding the inventory sheet. Lawson Family Storage Plan. The title alone made my stomach turn, because nobody creates a storage plan by accident. Plans require conversations, decisions, agreements, and I had been part of exactly none of those things. I kept reading. Storage location A, my address. Storage location B, Ryan's parents' barn, storage location C, a rented storage unit across town. Everything was organized, everything was documented, and somehow my garage had become part of the family system without anyone ever asking me. The worst part? There were dates. 3 years of dates. 3 years. I stared at the paper, because according to this document, Diane wasn't temporarily storing things. She was permanently storing them. That evening, I waited until after dinner, after Mason went upstairs, after the dishes were done. Then I placed the inventory sheet on the table in front of Ryan. His face changed immediately. Not surprise, recognition. The same look people get when they know exactly what they're about to be questioned about. I pointed at the paper. "What is this?" Ryan looked down, then sighed. "It's just a storage list." Just. There was that word again. Just. People love the word just when they're trying to make a problem sound smaller. I folded my arms. "Why is my address on it?" He didn't answer immediately, which told me everything. Finally, he said, "Diane was going through a divorce." I stared at him. What does that have to do with asking permission? Silence. A long silence, because it had nothing to do with permission. Ryan rubbed his forehead. "We were trying to help." I nodded slowly. Helping wasn't the issue. Helping someone once is kindness. Turning someone else's garage into a warehouse without telling them is something else entirely. The next morning, I decided to see exactly how much stuff belonged to Diane. Not guess, not estimate, no. I spent 2 hours in the garage, reading labels, checking bins, opening boxes. By noon, I had a list, 27 boxes, 9 plastic containers, 3 lamps, 2 bookshelves, a dining table, 6 dining chairs, 4 suitcases, holiday decorations, kitchen supplies, old photo albums, seasonal clothing, and a treadmill. A treadmill. I actually laughed when I found it, because somehow a treadmill hidden behind camping equipment felt ridiculous. My garage looked less like a garage and more like a storage company. I was writing everything down when my neighbor, Patricia, walked over. Patricia had lived next door for 10 years. Friendly, observant, the kind of person who noticed everything. She glanced into the garage, then smiled. "Looks like Diane's finally moving her stuff." I froze, completely. "What?" Patricia looked confused. "Diane." My stomach tightened. "What about Diane?" Patricia pointed toward the boxes. "She's been storing things here forever." For a moment I couldn't speak, because Patricia knew, my neighbor knew. Apparently everyone knew, everyone except me. Patricia laughed lightly. "I always thought it was nice of you. Nice of me." I forced a smile, then somehow ended the conversation without explaining that I had only learned about it yesterday. When she left, I stood alone in the garage, trying to process what had just happened, because if the neighbors knew, who else knew? That night my phone rang. The caller ID showed Diane. I answered, immediately. "Hi, Heather." Her voice sounded cheerful, relaxed, comfortable, like someone calling about weekend plans. I looked around the garage, at the boxes, the furniture, the treadmill, then calmly asked, "Diane, exactly when were you planning to move your things out of my garage?" The silence on the other end of the phone lasted almost 5 full seconds, and suddenly, I had a feeling she wasn't expecting that question. The silence lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Then Diane finally laughed, a nervous laugh, the kind people use when they're trying to buy time. "Oh, Heather." Not an answer, just my name. I stared at the garage. "Diane." Another pause. Then she said something that immediately irritated me. "I didn't realize it was bothering you." I closed my eyes, because that wasn't true. You don't store half your belongings in someone else's garage for 3 years without realizing it might bother them. You simply stop thinking about it. There's a difference. I leaned against a workbench. "When were you planning to move it?" This time her answer came quickly. "I don't know." At least that part sounded honest. And somehow, honesty made it worse, because I don't know meant there was no plan, no timeline, no end date, just an assumption that the garage would always be available. The call ended politely, which surprised me. No argument, no yelling, nothing. Just a conversation that somehow left me feeling even more frustrated than before. That Saturday, I decided to tackle the garage. Not Diane's things. Mine, the things I actually owned. I wanted to organize my side, maybe clear some space, maybe calm down. Instead, I found something else. Something hidden behind 2 storage shelves. A large plastic container, no label, no name, just a gray bin covered in dust. I pulled it out, opened it, and immediately froze. Inside were dozens of folders, paperwork, receipts, documents, property tax records, insurance forms, old family files. At first I assumed they belonged to Diane. Then I noticed a familiar signature, Ryan's. My stomach tightened. I sat down on an overturned bucket and started reading. Most of it was boring. House paperwork, storage receipts, moving invoices, nothing important. Then I found a folder marked Family Property. I opened it. And suddenly, everything became a lot more interesting, because inside wasn't just information about my garage. There were addresses, multiple addresses, storage locations, family assets, equipment, furniture, and names. Lots of names. I flipped through page after page, then stopped, because I found something that made my heart sink. Right there in black ink was my name, Heather Lawson. Underneath it were 4 words, most reliable storage option. I stared at the page, unable to believe what I was reading. Not homeowner, not family member, not sister-in-law, storage option. Like I was a facility, like my house was a resource, like my opinion wasn't part of the equation. I sat there for a long time, long enough for the garage to grow dark around me, long enough for anger to become something else, clarity. For 3 years, everyone had been treating my garage as community property. Not because they were trying to hurt me, because nobody had ever told them to stop. That evening, Ryan came home and found me sitting at the kitchen table. The folder sat between us. I didn't say anything. I simply pushed it across the table. Ryan opened it, saw the page, and immediately looked away. That told me everything. He'd seen it before. Maybe not recently, but before. I pointed at the line. Most reliable storage option. Ryan sighed, a long, exhausted sigh, then quietly admitted, my dad made that list. The room became silent, because suddenly this wasn't about Diane anymore. This wasn't one sister-in-law storing boxes. This was something bigger, something that involved the entire family, and judging by Ryan's face, I had only discovered the beginning of it. Ryan stared at the folder for several seconds, long enough to tell me everything. His father had created the list, but Ryan had known it existed. Maybe not every detail, maybe not every update, but enough. Enough to know my garage hadn't become a storage unit by accident. I sat quietly across from him, waiting. Finally he spoke. It started after Diane's divorce. I nodded. I already knew that part. Then he continued. After that, everyone started leaving things there. Everyone. The word landed harder than I expected. Everyone. Not Diane. Not one person. Everyone. I opened the folder again. Suddenly, all the names made sense. The furniture, the boxes, the equipment, the storage plan. This wasn't Diane's storage problem. It was the Lawson Family Storage System. And somehow my garage had become the center of it. Without my permission, without my knowledge, without even a conversation. The next morning, I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and did something I should have done 3 years earlier. I made a list, every item, every box, every shelf, every belonging that wasn't mine. It took nearly 4 hours. When I finished, the total shocked even me. Almost 60% of the garage belonged to other people. 60%, more than half. That afternoon, I sent one email, not angry, not emotional, just clear. The subject line read, "Garage inventory and pickup schedule." I attached photos, a complete inventory list, and one simple message: please arrange pickup of your belongings within the next 30 days. Then I hit send. The response came quickly, very quickly. Some relatives were surprised, some were embarrassed, some apologized immediately, a few complained, but for the first time since this started, that wasn't my problem. Over the next 2 weeks, people began arriving. One cousin picked up camping gear, an uncle collected old tools, another relative removed several boxes of holiday decorations. Every day the garage looked a little different, a little bigger, a little more like mine. Then came Diane. She arrived on a Saturday morning, a rental truck parked behind her SUV. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she looked around the garage and laughed softly, not because she thought it was funny, because she finally saw it, really saw it. The shelves, the furniture, the boxes, the sheer amount of space she'd taken. I guess it got out of hand. I folded my arms, just a little. For the first time since this started, we both smiled, not because everything was fixed, because at least we were finally being honest. By sunset, her things were gone, all of them. The treadmill, the dining table, the boxes, everything. The garage echoed when I walked through it. I hadn't heard that echo in years. That night, Ryan stood beside me looking at the empty space. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then he quietly said, "I should have handled this sooner." I looked at him, and for once, he wasn't making excuses. He wasn't minimizing. He wasn't saying it wasn't a big deal. He was simply telling the truth. Sometimes that's enough. A month later, I parked my car in the garage, not squeezed into one corner, not surrounded by other people's belongings, right in the middle, exactly where it belonged. As I shut off the engine, I sat there for a moment, looking around. The shelves, the workbench, the open space, mine, all mine. The funny thing is, the real victory wasn't getting the garage back. It was realizing that helping people and giving up your boundaries are not the same thing. For years, I'd confused the two. Now I didn't, and that made all the difference. If you've ever had someone slowly take over something that belonged to you, leave a comment below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more family drama stories. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.